because there's something else going on. And it's not that you're dishonest about it, it's that you're not in touch with it. Because being in touch with it would also have to make you face the fact that maybe you don't want to go to that job anymore. Maybe you don't want to be in that relationship anymore. And maybe it means you got to leave. And maybe you got your life tied up in that job and your family's dependent on you and you're living with that person and you have to move and you don't want to move and you're scared because that's really what's behind the anger. And really at the end of the day, you got someone who's saying, I'm fine. And they're scared. But we had to go through all of that. And it's like, why don't you just tell me you're scared? Well, they didn't know they were scared.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte.
Exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
It's another day of podcasting with me and Evan. Evan, how you doing, man? All right, we're talking honesty. I don't know. We're talking truth. We're talking we don't really even know what we're going to title this one because I think I don't know what it's going to be called, but this is kind of what we're working with. We're working with honesty and delusion. I think that helps us kind of have some direction and you kind of know what we're getting into. But here, let me present one idea and I'm going to toss it over to Evan. I'm reading a book right now called Ordinary People. It's an older book. And basically, the story goes, it's about basically a family and a father and a mother and their son. And they had another son and that son died. I'm not really quite sure how. And the other son, who's still alive, tried to commit suicide. And now he's recovering and everybody's kind of worked up about him and he's trying to figure it out. And anyway, there's a chapter in there where the therapist he's talking to is talking to him about emotion and trying to ask him how he's feeling. And the kid goes, well, I'm not feeling anything. And then as it goes on, he's like, well, you're angry. And he's like, yeah, I'm angry, but I can't let it out because if I let it out, like, it's just like it's opening a closet and everything comes out. And he's like, well, it's like there's a person in the closet too. And then they come out. And the thought that I had about all of this, and this is kind of in the book, I thought it was relevant, was that you have to open up, if say anger is an emotion that you don't want to deal with, you have to open up that closet and you have to look in there and you have to kind of meet the person who's in there or sort through the stuff that's in there. Because if you never do that, you're always just kind of going to keep this thing closed in your life, but it's going to open up on you when you don't want. And you're not going to be honest about the feeling, partly because you don't even know it's opened up on you. You don't even know you're angry or sad or whatever the thing is. And you can be delusional because you're actually angry and everybody can see you're angry, but you're like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's like, you're not fine. And that's a bit of delusion, right? So honesty requires a bit of us sometimes going into those places we don't want to go into because we can't even be honest because we're not willing to actually be honest with ourselves. And I don't know if that will contribute to this conversation, but that was a little bit of where I'm coming from starting. So I don't know if you got anything to add there, Evan. What are your thoughts?
Ooh, I mean, yeah, I mean, the topic of honesty and delusion is no small thing. And I think that especially in today's day and age, like you could argue that, in the whole space of like psychotherapy, right, counseling, that whole thing is in so many ways it's an endeavor for a person to actually get help just being honest with themselves, right, which is pretty wild to think about. Like it's pretty wild to think that we have an entire industry that's there to help people just weave through so many delusions and lies that for the most part we're telling ourselves, right? That we can definitely, we're telling other people as well, but lies that in so many regards start with us and the things that we say to ourselves, and just to weed through it so we can actually get to what we honestly think, what we honestly feel. And it has so much to tell us, it has so much to inform us about. And the with more clarity that we have around what those things are, I mean, I think that our lives in so many ways become so much easier to a certain extent. Like, it's not easy, but like easier, because it's so hard to do anything with your life when you're just living under all of these lies and all of this dishonesty. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that honesty and just as far as what I'm sort of coming in with as part of our like pre-chat that we had with all of this, you know, I'm interested in this potentially discussing some things around principles and honesty. And there's also the relationship that an artist, because we are the way of the artist, and I feel like we would be missing a big component of this if we didn't talk about that on some level. But, you know, the job of the artist is so much about being honest, and which doesn't necessarily mean that everything that they're saying is true, like by some objective standard, but is honest, right? And so, I mean, there's maybe a discussion to happen there, the difference between honesty and truth. And was there anything else? I feel like there was something else in there, but maybe it will come back around. But yeah, oh yeah, and also like on a spiritual sense, whatever that is to the listeners out there. Something that I mentioned to you as well was from a book that I read by Ram Dass called Grist for the Mill. And so that every spiritual path, you must begin it with absolute honesty. And I don't know if those are exactly the words, but that was the message, that there's no, that inner growth can't happen without just really naked honesty with yourself. And that makes that shouldn't come as any surprise. It seems like a pretty obvious thing to say. It's like, how can you possibly grow in any positive direction without having that honesty? And I guess in relationship to what you were saying and this book that you're reading, that, you know, this character in the story was so afraid of opening that closet. And I think that, you know, I can relate to that. You know, there are things that we feel, things that we think, that we are so afraid of what happens if I let that thing out of the closet. You know, what's going to happen if that thing comes out? You know, like, I think that we're so concerned of it being this horribly destructive force that's going to just ruin everything. And I think that for most of us, that's usually not the case. In my own experiences, when there's something that I've been keeping from someone that I haven't been saying, typically when I do come to a place where I have the openness and the courage to say it, it's almost, I don't think it's almost never been met with a negative response. Right. And that's, I think that maybe sometimes we don't give others enough credit, you know, for how they might receive our honesty. Right. Because it's hard to argue with someone with the truth of how they're feeling about something, you know, and especially when you learn how to express yourself in that way. And I'm saying a lot of things. I realized I would turn it back to you, Brandon, but like, you know, coming back to the whole thing of counseling, like one of the first things that you have to learn through that process is, especially within the context of something like couples therapy, is learning how to talk to each other, right? Learning how to talk to each other in a way that is respectful and where that thing that you're feeling can be received, right? Which is why so often like the standard is like, well, just tell your partner how you feel, right? As opposed to you do this and you do that and da 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 da. Like when you're throwing blame at people, it's not met with a good reaction. But when you get honest about the thing that's going on inside of you, it can be received. There's room for compassion to enter into that space, and it's very hard for compassion to enter into an outward sort of, an outward lashing, I suppose. So I rambled a lot of stuff there, Brandon. Anything that you're picking up on?
Evan. You said a lot. I have a lot to say in return. I'm always curious why people don't tell the truth. And I don't always think that people know they're not telling the truth. And I think that's important to remember because it helps us to give the benefit of the doubt to people as they're trying to communicate to us that they don't always know their truth because they're not in touch with it. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, especially when it becomes about feelings. Like, a lot of people, they're not in touch with where they're at emotionally, and they have past trauma and they have things where, they're not in touch and they don't really know what's going on. And they just know like, I'm uncomfortable, but they don't know the emotion that's at play and what's making them uncomfortable. And so it helps, I think, to be patient with people and to try to have some compassion and understanding that they don't know. And so it's not that they're being dishonest purposefully. They're doing it almost unconsciously because they don't know. And it's not even like it's one thing if someone's trying to deceive you. It's another thing if they've deceived themselves and they believe their own deceptions, right? So, and this goes, if you're having trouble following this or understanding it, just go back to a time where you said, I'm fine. When are you ever fine? When are you ever fine? You know what I mean? Like, what does that even mean? Like, really, I'm fine. Like, well, it means, there's nothing notable. Nothing notable because nothing is noticed. But everything is going on all at the same time. All those emotions are all accessible at all times. So if really it is fine, then why aren't you choosing the one you want? Like happy, joyful, excited, exuberant. And then you go, well, I just don't feel that way. Well, why? What's stopping you from that? And so if you start asking the questions and you investigate, all of a sudden you realize, well, the truth is I don't really have the life that I want to have. And I fucking hate going to my job every day. And the truth is that blah, blah, and all of a sudden, so you're angry. Okay. Yeah, but I don't want to feel this angry. I want to feel fine because I don't want to feel this shit. And it's like, yeah, but the truth is you're angry and you don't like what you're doing and you're not happy. And you wake up in the morning and you barely get out of bed. You don't even have a shower or brush your teeth. You just go to fucking work. And what is that? And someone out there, they go, well, that's me. And you go, yeah, because there's something else going on. And it's not that you're dishonest about it. It's that you're not in touch with it. Because being in touch with it would also have to make you face the fact that maybe you don't want to go to that job anymore. Maybe you don't want to be in that relationship anymore. And maybe it means you got to leave. And maybe you got your life tied up in that job and your family's dependent on you. And you're living with that person and you have to move and you don't want to move. And you're scared because that's really what's behind the anger. And really at the end of the day, you got someone who's saying, I'm fine. And they're scared. But we had to go through all of that. And it's like, why don't you just tell me you're scared? But they didn't know they were scared. And so we got all this stuff going on. And I think this is really important to remember that everybody has this battle going on at all times. And, one thing I learned through acting was that all these emotions are always happening and they're always accessible. And it just starts to become a thing of focus and attention. And it's never that you're never angry or sad or happy or whatever. It's that you begin to work with these feelings. And sometimes a little sadness comes into the happiness, and hey, that's all right. And sometimes there's a little anger and sadness, and sometimes there's fear that sneaks in, and disgust and whatever feelings, but the thing is that you begin to be able to get sensitive to it. And I think one of the other challenges too, and I'll pass it off to you in a second here, that once we get in touch with our feelings, we can become indulgent in our feelings because we don't know how to deal with it, because then our life becomes about feeling all the time. And that's problematic too, because anybody who guides their life entirely by feeling will be a mess, and they will probably fail at every goal they ever had in their life, because feelings usually will fall short when it comes to long-term discipline and character. And that's when you need to put your feelings aside. But it doesn't mean, though, that your feelings should be always put aside, because sometimes you literally will not be able to be disciplined to do the thing, because the emotion will constantly be too much at some point, because you're not managing it, you're not handling it, you're not in touch with it. So you have to have a little bit, if you're a very goal-oriented person, you still have to have a little bit of being in touch with your emotion. And if you're a very feely, touchy, connected person, it's sometimes you have to put your emotions aside, and you have to just be like, hey, let's just like get the job done. Let's just do the thing, because that's also important in life, and too much of either leads to pain, right? I mean, we kind of know this, but it's a balance. It's a balancing act. So anyway, honesty, being delusional about all this stuff. Yeah. I mean, we all are. I think that's the point.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really great point, where it's because in many ways it's, and on this podcast, we tout very often, the importance of using feeling as a guidance system for many things, for many situations. Like it's there to inform us of something. It's there to tell us something, and it has a place. But as you're mentioning, it's like it's only one of the faculties that we have at our disposal as being human beings and yeah, if you put all your eggs in that basket, it's going to create a rough ride as well, because you're using it in places where it's not supposed to be, where it's not super effective, mm-hmm. like it. And it's the same thing with the intellect as well. The intellect is an incredibly powerful tool, but it's not good in some areas, right? It's not, there's some things that it's not its strength to work on, right? Like and where you do need to give way to allow that feeling, intuitive thing to step into the picture. Like acting, I can speak to this, to a large extent as well, because the intellect will not, there are so many ways in which your intellect can serve you as an actor and will serve you as an actor. But if you try and insert it into a place where, actors can make up all kinds of crazy backstories for their characters and come up with all sorts of interesting things about their character, but it doesn't do anything to actually make them come alive emotionally, that makes them come across as real human beings. They're just sort of, almost like sociopaths on stage. But so many actors go about it that way, and it's just like, oh, I'm not getting connected. I'm not connected. It's like, well, it's because there's a whole feeling component that you have to activate in here too, right? That you have to bring to the table. And very often actors are trying to access the emotional component through the intellect component. And it's just mm-hmm. like, well, why? Yeah. The intellect doesn't know very much about that. Like it has a different job, and the emotional part is the emotional aspect of us is a little bit more chaotic, is a little bit more unpredictable. And I think that's, that can be a challenging space to try and step into and navigate. But this is all to say that, from what you're saying, Brandon, is that, yeah, like it's, if you put too much into that thing, especially in your life, like where you just completely guided by feeling all the time, it's probably going to create a lot of pain in your life that isn't always necessary, because you're just, everything is being guided by that. And again, this comes back to this, to me, this whole thing of honesty. Like, maybe you choose to guide your life completely by that feeling place, but if you start running into failed relationships or something like that, like you just continually are having failed relationships all the time, that's causing a lot of pain. Maybe it's because this is the way that you're guiding yourself, right? Because as you said, what can happen is you can become very self-absorbed in that world. You can become so self-centered, on, it's like, well, it's all about how I feel all the time. But the problem is that, like, it's like, yeah, but what about consideration of how other people feel, right? Like, that's sort of the extreme end of that picture, where it's like, yeah, but other people, there's other people and they think and feel and stuff too, which is, again, the importance of just honesty, right? That's how we as human beings need to navigate conflict with each other, is through honesty. Like, otherwise we don't know, again, like the what's the action to take. We can't possibly know what the action to take is unless we actually know what the fuck is going on, right? So yeah, no, that's good point, Brandon. My long-winded way of saying good point.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to try to start to navigate your feelings and figure them out. I think, I think everybody should accept that they are a little bit delusional. I think that will make you much more humble.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you'll be able to navigate the world a lot better, because there is this assumption that many of us, I'd say if not most of us, seem to carry around, that we have it all together and we know, and that, and we see someone else doing something and we're like, well, I don't like that, or that doesn't make sense. And if they just did it my way, everything would be fine. And it's like, yeah, well, your way might not be the best way either, and there might be some gaps in your process as well. And, I think the thing is at the end of the day, like, you want to try to understand above all, like, if you want things in life, I would say you could pretty much have anything you want in life if you're willing to understand and you're willing to help, because those two things come from a place of abundance. Because once you put yourself in that position of, I want to understand and I want to help, you become somebody who's not only valuable and patient, but you become somebody who's very giving, and giving people live in a state of abundance. So you might feel like you're lack, and you might feel like you're barely getting by, but there's a trick to this whole game of life, right? It's you can trick yourself into being an abundant person. And I would actually, like, whether you're being delusional about it or not, it's a great delusion to take on, because, we're all delusional ultimately anyway. So pick your poison, pick your delusion. You might as well pick a delusion of being grateful, a delusion of being giving, caring, kind, helpful, understanding person. Right? What's the alternative? You can play into the delusion of scarcity. There's never enough. It's all a delusion anyway. It's the whole thing is like this whole story about, oh, I can't have this or that isn't accessible. That's all bullshit. None of that's real. Most of the stories that we tell ourselves in our mind, they're not real. And that if the moment that you understand that, you have cracked the code to this life. Because the moment you realize it's all bullshit and you get to choose, that's when you get to start training your perspective to see the world how you would wish to see it. Now, it doesn't mean that the world is that way, but the cool thing about this life is that it will be that way for you. And so if you want to, for example, poison yourself, perceive yourself as a victim all the time, always see how the world's out to get you, how everything's unfair, how you never have enough and everybody treats you wrong. Like go ahead, you'll get it. I promise you, you will get it tenfold. And that's an easy one to get. You know why? Because nobody is going to fight you on it. Nobody's going to challenge it, you know? And hopefully they do, because you don't want to be feeding yourself poison. But if you start telling yourself, hey man, you know, like I go out and I find the parking spot I want to find, like right in front of the place. And you know what? I always meet the best people wherever I go. And, you know, and people really like me, you know, and you tell yourself this kind of stuff. Guess what? It's going to start happening. But people are like, oh, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Why? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because look at your belief. No, it doesn't. That's your belief. That's your reality. You're delusional. I'm delusional. The difference is I'm enjoying it and you're not.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, right? Like, and here's the thing. When it comes to our delusions, if we start imposing like on other people and we start like hurting them or causing them disruption because we have a delusion that's not healthy for everyone else, you know, you might want to correct that, right? Because, you know, if you go around and you find out that you're damaging and hurting other people, and, you know, your delusion isn't going to pay dividends back to you very, very much. You're going to start to realize the consequences if you're damaging other people, because, you know, some people call it karma, but it's just the energy. It's like it's the action, reaction, reality of this world. You keep fucking people over, eventually that's going to catch up with you, and you're not going to have any friends, and you're not going to have any people that want anything to do with you. But if you go out there, you help everybody, you try to make everyone's life better. And, you know, at the same time, don't let people walk over you, but like, you know, do your best to be of value. You're going to find out that, you know, people are generally going to be there when you need it. And that's, you know, and the thing is we see the best in each other by our delusions, right? Like if you see people as good, you see the good in them, you bring the good out in them generally. If you see bad in everyone, you bring the bad out in them, you'll see the bad in them, right? So, you know, like I think that the thing about this is this delusion is we're talking about not the truth, but your truth. And look, if you have a beautiful truth, whether it is the truth or not the truth of the world as it is, but your truth is a beautiful truth, meaning you have a beautiful vision and you live in accordance to that beautiful vision, most of us will want to join it, because you'll be creating a playground reality that we all want to be a part of. I mean, reality is you'll get a lot of friends and you'll get a lot of people that want that, and they might want to actually do it with you. And it's, some people call it vibration, they call it frequency. It's all the same stuff, right? And it is kind of real. That's the thing. Is it real? Is it not real? That's the game though, right? You know, that's kind of the game. It's like, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, man, like everybody in this world could be a robot. How am I supposed to really know? You know, like, I don't know. I could be waking up and I could be in some game and I just think I'm living this life. Who knows? I don't really know for sure. But I play along sincerely in this life, and I do what I do, and I try to enjoy it. And, you know, good things seem to happen. And sometimes I come up against challenges and I try to go, you know what, that's a lesson. There's a gift in that. And that's how I see it. And you know what, I do learn a lesson from it because I look for a lesson in it. And, you know, maybe it was just a random thing that happened. Maybe it meant nothing. And maybe there was no lesson in it, but I learned from it. So there was, you know, and that's just like, it's a good delusion at the end of the day, because I get to play in this life. I get to interpret and perceive this life however I choose, just like everyone else does.
Hey everybody, this is Evan, and this episode is brought to you by my book. Yes, I recently released a book called The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Expand yourself as an actor and your craft through a spiritual perspective. Take a journey that will explore universal philosophies and insights to help you understand human nature in a profound way and develop practices to take your work to another level. Again, that's The Actor's Awakening, Connecting Spirituality to Craft, available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. And as always, if you like the show, please subscribe. man, you bring up a lot of things that where do I begin? A lot of what you're saying reminds me of this saying, our lives are not so much shaped by our experiences as they are by our expectations.
Mm.
A lot of what you're saying makes it there, and the stories that we tell ourselves are a huge part of what our expectations are. And there was something else in what you were saying there. Oh, I think I lost it. Well, that's
Maybe
how
it'll
the
come
cookie
back.
crumb that, you know what? It was just that, like because the whole question of truth and what is truth, and, and I know there's a long held philosophical conversation about truth and beauty, and truth is beauty, beauty is truth, that sort of a thing as well. That might be getting a little bit into the weeds, but there's something about truth and honesty and this thing of delusion. It's it's like, how do we not like delude ourselves in a world that is so almost impossible to comprehend, in a universe that's almost impossible to comprehend, right? Where we're still asking ourselves questions at the highest level of study. It's like, are we a simulation? Are we like, here we are, thousands of years of human consciousness, and we're just like, we don't really know exactly what we are precisely yet, and it's, we can try and say some things with something that's reliably true, right? Like, we can say, it's like, well, this is reliably true, like it tends to go this way, but there's seems to always be anomalies. There seems to always be exceptions. There seems to, there's nothing ever seems to be certain all the time, which is why I think that, those stories that we tell ourselves, those expectations are, I think, part of the delusion, because they're these things that we've sort of grabbed onto. They're these ideas that we've sort of grabbed onto, and now we're walking around with them, and we're holding them out in front of us everywhere that we go. And I think that if we're really interested in honesty and truth, I think that, I don't know if it's really a commodity, if that makes sense. Like, if it's really something that's possessed, maybe that's a better word for it. It's not.
What do you mean? I'm not following.
So I don't think that truth is not something that, it's not something that we possess necessarily, because it's not, I don't know if it's a thing, but it's something that we can find, but I think we can only find it from moment to moment. Does that make sense? Like, it's not something that, like, we can just carry around with us, from the past into the present into the future, because I think that it will ultimately at some point prove to become untrue at some point in time, and then it will become true again, and then it won't be true in a certain, but it's not something that's stable. Does that make sense? Like, it's,
well, I think the truth is complex, and I think there are simple things that, I don't know, like, simple things might be able to remain true, but when you get, like, once you get past that into this complexity, I think that's what you're talking about. It's like, it's interpretation and perception. And I think the thing is that what's true for us in one moment might not be true for us in another moment. And I think that the chaos of that is hard for sometimes for people to accept and be okay with, because we like constants. We like things that are predictable. We like control. All of those things make us feel safe and secure. And if the truth is not always going to be consistent, or it's able to change, that doesn't feel safe and secure. It feels chaotic, and it just feels maybe dangerous, right? So I think that we have perception. So like I could tell you something that I think is true based on my perception of where I'm at. It's not that I'm not being honest about it,
Mm-hmm.
but then I might have a realization later and realize that what I told you wasn't true. But at the time, I did believe it to be true
Mm-hmm.
because I thought that's what was going on, And then later I might realize, oh no, that was actually not the case. But at the time, I genuinely thought it was. So,
Yeah.
I think this is an important thing for people to understand, particularly in their, artistic or creative part of their life, that what's exciting about that to me is that it means you can change and evolve, and you can actually do so quite quickly. Because a lot of people get this belief that they can't change, and they're like, oh, old dog, new tricks, can't do it. Leopard doesn't change his spots kind of nonsense. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, no. Yeah, no.
Mm-hmm.
Yes and no. Like the thing is like, you really won't change your spots in certain ways. That is true. But in certain ways, that's totally not true. And that's the thing, we can't, it's not good for us. We can, but it's not good for us to blanket like these things onto everything and say, oh, it's always this way with everything. No, it's like that with maybe some things, but in other things, it's not like that at all.
Yeah. And I think, what you're saying, like that whole capacity to be able to come back to something that you said in a situation, said or did in some situation, and be able to say, it's like, oh, at the time I thought that was true, but now I'm saying it's still, it's still honesty. That's the thing that gets you there. Like, to me, that's,
yes,
that is sort of the, the principle that if that's a principle of yours is to always try and be as honest as you possibly can, which I think in many ways is almost like the principle. It's almost like a vow, of the artist to a certain extent, much like, how like doctors make a vow to like do no harm, right? It's like the artist does like in some ways should almost ritualistically and ceremoniously make a vow of honesty, right? But which is something in many ways I think that we can all do on a practical day-to-day level of our lives. But that thing of honesty is the thing that actually is the thing that will continually help guide you towards what is true, right? When things are changing constantly, right? To help keep you at least somewhat in that track. Because if we're not being, if we're being dishonest, there's no way that we can get to what's true, right? And, that's really the only way in which I think that's part of where so much of conversation has broken down in recent times as well, is because there's a very often a lack of honesty that's going on, right? Like there's people just trying to score points, or people trying to protect an image or a reputation, so people double down on faulty arguments or whatever it is. I'm sure people can think of all kinds of different examples and that they've seen over time. But and this is part of why I think we're having so much trouble sense making, is because we don't have that level of honesty that comes through, and why it's so refreshing when we see it, when we see people say like, oh, hey, when I said this, I was just, this was honest. This is what I thought. This is what I felt. And this is what I thought was true. Right. But now I've recognized that is not the case, right? That honesty is the thing that keeps things from going completely off the rails, right? But there's, interestingly, it's like in trying to protect a delusion, like we create all of these problems.
Yeah, well, so this is a really interesting thing. I think I'm so glad because like we got to this point trying to protect a delusion. I feel like that is such a big part of why we are dishonest, because we have a delusion that somehow we think is serving us or keeping us safe or it's giving us something, and we're so scared to like let it go that we're willing to lie and cheat and deceive to keep it. And it's people, I think the thing is like those words that sound pretty harsh, but we do this in really like weird little ways where we won't acknowledge the other person's point. We won't listen to them. We will undermine the source. We'll do all sorts of things so that we can just kind of protect whatever this delusion is. And the thing is that sometimes we have a delusion that we think is good for us, and it's bad. It's not good for us. Like, I'll give you a great example. Having a drug habit. You think you have it under control. I had a friend who had an addiction to a pretty heavy drug, and they thought they had it under control. And then it wasn't until one day they wake up and they realize, hey, like my life's falling apart. Holy crap, right? And the thing is that some people wake up to their delusion early enough to save themselves from it, destroying them and everybody around them and things around them and all of that. Some don't. And so when you have a person around you that's saying, hey, like you see the world this way, I don't think it's good, and you're unwilling to listen to that, you're unwilling to hear them out, that's dangerous for you. Because if your delusion is really good, you should be willing to take criticism and feedback and all sorts of things. Because if it's a really good one, it's going to stand. It's going to be solid. But if it's not, it's going to get dismantled. And the thing is that people know when they have a weak delusion that they're kind of running with, because they know it isn't solid. They know it isn't secure. And maybe they don't, but maybe they're just afraid it's going to get taken away from them. I think the one thing you have to trust is that when one delusion gets destroyed or dismantled or taken away, something will always come in and take its place. And your goal is not to keep all the delusions you have, but it is to try to get the best set of them that you possibly can. Like you're collecting cards, like hockey cards or something. Like you're collecting just the best, right? Just get the best ones. And if something is taking up space where a better one could be, you need to be willing to let it go so that a new one can come in that would better serve you. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the people who are telling you the thing you don't want to hear are the best people for you, because they're actually the ones that are going to save you and help you. And sometimes the people that are enabling and telling you what you want to hear are the worst people for you, because they're actually keeping you there. For example, the drug addict who's hanging out with other drug addicts who are telling them that it's okay, they don't have a problem. But it's meanwhile, yeah, but that's a person that doesn't know they're addicted either. And now you guys are going off into the sunset, like just totally destroying your lives together. And neither of you are calling each other out, just holding hands, feeling lovely about that, right? But, and you could use this for anything. You could use this, like, it doesn't have to be drugs. It could be anything. Replace it with whatever. But the point is that, we often don't realize we're destroying or hurting ourselves and others because we think we have it under control. And that's where getting that's delusions are fine. That's part of the reason why I got this one last thing to say, Evan. That's part of the reason why we're not good alone as people. Like some of us can handle being alone pretty better than others, but ultimately none of us should really be alone indefinitely. And because the thing is the reason why is because you need another person to bounce your delusions off, because it helps you keep them in check. If you go off on your own for too long, you can actually get really lost and confused. Now, there is a benefit to going off on your own for a little while and then coming back with new things that you figured out on your own. But eventually you have to come back. if you just go out there, you can kind of go crazy, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. And there's a like, but you know, some people, I mean, there's people who go off for years, right? I'm not saying that you can't do years, but eventually it's better for you to come back at some point and interact with people again and see how those things interact with, you know, other worlds of people's perception.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a purely like an actual objective biological sense, if you put any cell in isolation, it becomes chaotic.
Right. You were telling me this about
Yeah.
the mono, what is it called?
Oh well, yeah,
Monoculture?
like monocultures, but like this is just like on a like a cell based level. Like
Yeah.
you isolate any cell. I think it even goes further than that. Like you isolate any molecule or atom or whatever it is, and you isolate it from other things. It's just, it becomes chaotic.
Well, also, Evan, though, I think it's important to mention it's not just separating that one single cell. If you put that cell with the same cell,
Mm,
that's also
yeah.
problematic. Like that's where
Yes.
people get lost in like cults and stuff, like these subgroups and things, because everybody is thinking the same way and nobody is challenging it. And then all of a sudden you're off in some weird place and you know, and you're like, how did I get so lost? Right. And toxic relationships are like that. I've been in one where it's just you and one other person, and that toxic person, well, for some reason you like what they're doing and you go with them and you get really far away from where you were, and it's not healthy. And then all of a sudden when you get out of it, you go, holy crap, how did I get this far away from where I was? And why did I go that way? And how did I let that happen? Right. And it's because you don't have enough outside influence outside of that relationship actually keeping things in check and going, hey, you know, this is a little weird. This is kind of wrong, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people just don't want to say something, you know, like you know, you see a couple and say one of the people is maybe talking poorly to the other person. You know, some people just go, oh well, that's their business, I'm not going to say anything. I always try to make an effort to just say, hey, you know, I take one person privately, I say, hey, you know, I didn't really like what you said to them over here, or I didn't like the way they said that to you. I'm just saying that's my take on it, take it as you will, because it helps people to, it actually, a lot of time people will thank me later because they go, yeah, I didn't really even realize that. Right. But it feels uncomfortable in the moment to do it. Right. But most people won't because it is uncomfortable and we don't want to do it. But we need that sometimes outside perspective to help us see, hey, wait, you're going down a bit of a, not a great road here. And let's correct this a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also reminds us too that we're not as isolated and invisible as we think we are too. To be reminded that it's just like, hey, you're connected and people notice and it has an effect, right? Like sometimes just recognizing that again, that you're part of a greater whole, you know, can be pretty wild. Let's you know what? Let's wrap this bad boy up.
Okay.
Let's talk beer and then make some closing comments. I've got some closing comments. I think that I've got to after this. So let's do that.
Okay,
So,
you tell me your beer, I'll tell you mine, and then you close and then I'll close.
I'm
'Cause
drinking.
I don't know what I'm going to say yet.
I'm drinking something pretty boring. So it's I'm just drinking a
Boring.
lager.
Come on.
No, it's Steamworks Lionsgate Lager. Just like a craft lager. Great. It's light. It's summertime. It always keeping it light in the summertime, and it's been good. You know, just
Yeah.
it's been good. What else can I say?
Yeah. I get you. It's a standard. It's like you know, the standard lager. Okay, well, I got mine's a little more interesting, I suppose. I've had this before. It's by Parallel 49, and it's called the Peach Bod Sparkling Peach Ale. And yeah, man, I like it. You know, I'm a big fan of peach. Like if I find peach in anything, I always want to try it. And they did a good balance on that beer. I've always liked this one. It's just enjoyable. It's nice and light, and it's got just the right amount of peach where it's not too sweet, but you know, it's enough to like feel like you're getting you, because sometimes you have a drink too and you're like, they say it's flavored and you're like, yeah, but is it? Whereas this, I'm like, yeah, no, it's a peach. I can tell, but at the same time, it's not too much. It's enjoyable. So
Mm.
Anyway, it's been good for this combo. So, what were your thoughts? What do you have to say?
I'm gonna. So this is a quote I've said a few times on the show before, but it's a great one, so it's worth repeating many times, often. It's from Pema Chodron, who said that awakening is continual annihilation until only what is true remains.
Mm.
And, that's this whole thing of, just what you were saying about, like, we have these things tested, and, we have to tear down these old things that we held as true sometimes, and a new thing takes its place, and sometimes another thing's going to take that place, and another thing's going to take that place, which is to say that, we always have to remain open, to having our minds changed about where we stand with something. But the only way we get there is through this thing of honesty, right? Until something reveals something to us, and that's something to celebrate, when that moment happens. I think that we're too guarded about, if someone, and it is like, I hate all of that, this shit that you see on YouTube where it's just like, watch as this person annihilates, destroys, like, it's just like, this is a part of the problem. This is actually getting in the way of people having the courage to have open and honest conversation with each other because of this stuff. It's all this egotistical, watch this person destroy the other person, as opposed to, hey, let's have some people have a conversation. Oh, it turns out this person was mistaken about something. And if we have a safer environment that we create for that dialogue to occur, people can admit to being wrong, and we can all just say, hey, fantastic, we've all learned something now because of this, because of that situation. So, and the last thing I wanted to say is that, in this whole thing about delusions, I was thinking of also, like, in terms of, as artists, artists are storytellers, and in a pure storytelling way, so many stories are about just exactly that. Delusions being destroyed, right? Delusions being destroyed about themselves, about some situation that they're in, and it means that something has to happen. That's where transformation occurs, right? Sometimes that delusion is destroyed early on, sometimes it's destroyed later on, and the only way to confront a delusion is with that honesty. And you brought up the example of, like, addiction, and I mean, addiction is a pretty extreme example of it, but it works well, where it's like, there's this heavy delusion going on until suddenly it's just like you can't delude yourself any longer, because the consequences of that delusion have become so great that the truth has to emerge out of it. And the honesty and the truth emerges, like, oh shit, I do have a problem. This is destroying my life. This is destroying other people's lives. I have to do something about it, right? Boom. Transformation, right? Like, it's a game changer, right? Like a moment of honesty can absolutely change the direction of everything, right? So, let's not forget about honesty, as scary as it can be to be honest, not even just to somebody else, but even to ourselves. And I think that we all need to work harder to do that. I know I do. So, yeah, man, I've enjoyed this chat. It's been really provocative for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's been good. It's a challenging subject matter to navigate at times, because, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I think about, like, what I'm going to say here at the end. At the end of the day, like, I really truly care about people, and I want people to feel. I want them to feel happy, and joyful, but I want them to feel strong, because I choose to live in a vision of abundance and joy and love, and one where I can help. And, you know, and and even in my weakest moments, I still try to help. And I just think it's a really important thing to try to choose that perspective. And I mean, if someone has a better perspective or a better way to go about it, I'm totally open to it and definitely willing to adapt and change and incorporate into my own perception and idea of how to go about this. I mean, I heard someone say this the other day, and I think it's an interesting comment, and I'll share it here is, stand in front of the mirror and lift up your shirt, or stand in front of it naked and just ask yourself, do you like what you see? When you look at your body, do you like what you see? The car you drive, the house you live in, these types of things. Like take a good look at everything. Do you like it? And like these are signs, like, do you care about yourself? Because if you're overweight and you're not taking care of yourself, I mean, it's the reality. Like there's a reality. Like, do you care about yourself? And ask yourself these questions, like these hard questions, right? And it's not a judgment thing. It's not a thing about like shaming someone for being. It's you. Look at yourself and really honestly ask yourself, do I like what I see? Because the thing is that if you do, then good job. You're caring about yourself. And if you don't, then it's time to start caring about yourself. And you need to build a perception which will help you to do that. When I was, I'll say this, when I was a teenager, I mean, man, I had like an 8-pack. Like I was just ripped. I was cut. Like I was, and I was tuned up and in shape. And, I'm not that way anymore, but I'm not totally out of shape. But there are times where I look at myself and I go, Brandon, come on, man, get your shit together. Like, this is not okay. And the reality is, I get myself and I go, okay, you got to get yourself back into shape. You got to tune up a little bit here. And the thing is that's an act of care. And sometimes an act of care requires, some pain and some discipline and some things like that. But if you ask yourself these questions, if you begin to, like, one of the things I learned through personal coaching was a good personal coach will get you, like, if you say want to lose weight, they'll get you to, let's get on the weigh scale. Let's look in the mirror. Do you like the weight you are? Do you like how you look in the mirror? Are you proud to do this? Does this make you feel good? If you went out in the world and you showed this, is this, and if you're good, then nothing to change. No worries. Keep doing what you're doing because you're doing it right. But if you don't like it and you want to change it, then you're doing something wrong. And it's time to admit that. And that's the truth. And one of the first things you learn when you become an actually effective coach, because there's lots of bullshitters out there, and I would say be wary of the false prophet. A good coach will say, you tell me the truth and I will help you find the way. But if you bullshit me, there's no way that I or anyone else can ever help you. And so I would say this, as my send off to everybody else. Look, if you want your dreams, if you want to care about yourself, if you want good things in your life, the truth is the way. And it's your truth. Nobody's telling you can't be 20 pounds overweight or whatever. Like, you can do whatever you want to do. But at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, is this really what I want to do? And if it's not, then change it. And if it is, then keep going, man, because you got it right. But if it's what you want to change, then let's be honest. And there you go. So perception, delusion, I don't know, and you can look at it in every area of your life, right? So, and it's your decision, right? And you decide how to interpret and how to perceive, and that's your truth. And we can all respect that. But if you're lying to yourself, and other people are seeing that you're bullshitting yourself, don't be upset when someone says, hey, I think you're full of shit. Because the only reason why you would be upset with that is because you're full of shit. Because if you knew you were in your truth and someone said you were full of shit, you'd be like, oh, whatever, I don't give a shit what you say. I'm in my truth. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't even be affected by it. But if you're affected, that's a big warning sign that you're not in your truth. If you're reactive to it, you're not in your truth. Because the only reason why something hurts is because something's true about it, right? For you. Maybe not for them, but for you. And that's what matters. So, you know, you matter, and I care about you on the other end of this, and I care about me, and I care about Evan, and I care about anybody who wants to interact with this conversation. So, you know, I want the best for you. So, best thing I can tell you to do is be true with you, and you'll be good.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.